Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a woman walking alone, not lost but deliberate, her steps echoing in the quiet corridors of her life. She has no circle of friends, no crowd to validate her existence, yet there's a peculiar strength about her, a calm, self-contained certainty. What does it mean to live this way? Is it isolation, or is it freedom? Let us begin by understanding solitude. To many, solitude is a shadow of loneliness, but in truth, solitude is a mirror. In the absence of others, we see ourselves as we are unmasked and undistorted. The woman with no friends isn't necessarily unloved or forgotten. Rather, she has discovered something most of us run from: the company of her own mind. The friendship with oneself is perhaps the most undervalued relationship. In a world that measures worth by the number of hands we shake, she has chosen to extend her hand inward. She dines with her thoughts, laughs at her quirks, and forgives her faults. This isn't selfishness, it's self-awareness, a prerequisite for authentic connection. Society often paints a grim picture of a friendless existence. It glorifies togetherness as if belonging to a group with a sole purpose of being. Yet how many friendships are merely acts of convenience, bound not by mutual understanding, but by mutual fear of solitude? The woman with no friends is unshackled by this illusion. She is not chasing the approval of a crowd, she is walking her own path. Think of a solitary tree standing in the middle of a vast plain. It has no forest to lean on, no neighboring trunks for support, yet its roots run deep. It bends with the wind, drinks from the earth, and stands unyielding against the storm. The woman with no friends is like this tree, not weak, but resilient, her strength drawn from the depths of her soul. Paradoxically, the capacity to be alone is what prepares us for true connection. When we are no longer desperate for companionship, we approach relationships not as beggars seeking fulfillment, but as whole beings sharing our abundance. The woman with no friends isn't closed off, she is simply unwilling to settle for anything less than genuine bonds. And so her story is not one of emptiness, but of liberation. Without the distractions of shallow friendships, she is free to think, to feel, to grow. She does not conform to the rhythm of the crowd, she dances to her own music. And perhaps that is her greatest gift to the world, the reminder that solitude is not the absence of company, but the presence of self. So the next time you see her walking alone, do not pity her. She has found something many of us are still searching for: peace in her own skin. Solitude is often misunderstood. When people hear the word, they think of loneliness, a vast, echoing void where one feels incomplete, isolated, or even abandoned. But solitude is not an empty room, it is a mirror. Unlike a conventional mirror that reflects only the surface, solitude reveals the layers beneath the essence of who we are without the noise of external voices. In our daily lives, we are constantly surrounded by opinions, expectations, and distractions. Friends, family, colleagues, all these relationships, though meaningful, can sometimes act as filters, altering how we see ourselves. When we are perpetually in the company of others, it becomes easy to define ourselves through their eyes. Am I liked? Am I successful? Am I enough? These questions are often answered not from within, but by seeking external affirmation. But in solitude, there is no one else to answer. It is just you, stripped of the societal roles you play, the masks you wear, and the validation you seek. It is in this space that solitude begins its transformative work. Alone, you are free to confront your thoughts, feelings, and fears without judgment. This can be uncomfortable, even frightening at first. After all, how often do we truly allow ourselves to sit with the unfiltered reality of who we are? Solitude acts as a mirror by reflecting not just the parts of ourselves we like to show the world, but also the parts we've hidden away. It shows us our strengths, our vulnerabilities, and the places where we are still growing. In this reflection, we begin to understand that our worth is not contingent on how others perceive us. We are enough not because someone said so, but because we have taken the time to see it for ourselves. The beauty of solitude is that it does not demand anything from us. There is no need to impress, explain, or justify. It is a space of pure being where we can explore our passions, ponder our questions, and reconnect with the things that make us feel alive. It allows us to rediscover our own voices, the quiet whispers of intuition and creativity that often get drowned out in the noise of the world. In solitude, we may also encounter our deepest fears, those nagging doubts and insecurities that we bury beneath layers of busyness. But here's the paradox facing these fears in solitude doesn't weaken us, it strengthens us. The act of confronting them head-on, without distraction, teaches us resilience. We learn that we can sit with discomfort and still be okay, that we can feel uncertainty and still move forward. Think of solitude as a retreat, not a retreat from life, but a retreat into the self. It is a place to recharge, to realign with your values, and to gain clarity about what truly matters. Like a still pond reflecting the sky, solitude offers a clear and honest view of who you are and what you seek. And in that clarity you may find peace not because life is perfect, but because you have learned to navigate it with self-awareness and inner strength. So when we say that solitude is a mirror, we mean it is the rarest kind of reflection, one that shows us who we are when no one else is looking. It invites us to embrace our flaws, celebrate our gifts, and step into the world with a deeper sense of authenticity. Solitude doesn't isolate us, it liberates us. It is not a prison, but a sanctuary, a place where we are reminded that being alone is not the same as being lonely. It is instead the birthplace of self-discovery. What does it mean to truly befriend oneself? It may sound like a simple idea, even cliché, but in practice, it is one of the most profound and challenging journeys a person can undertake. Friendship with the self is not about ego or self-indulgence. It is about building a relationship with your inner being that is rooted in understanding, compassion, and trust. This is the foundation for everything else in life, because how can we expect to connect meaningfully with others if we remain strangers to ourselves? To befriend oneself is to become acquainted with the full spectrum of who you are. Much like any deep friendship, it requires time, patience, and effort. It begins with self-awareness, an honest willingness to see yourself as you are not just the parts you like, but also the parts you avoid. Just as a true friend accepts you with all your quirks and imperfections, befriending yourself means embracing your flaws as well as your strengths. Think for a moment about how we treat our closest friends. When they're going through a hard time, we offer them kindness, understanding, and a shoulder to lean on. Yet, when we face our own struggles, how often do we respond with self-criticism or impatience? We set impossibly high standards for ourselves, berate ourselves for mistakes, and often withhold the very compassion we so freely give to others. Friendship with the self flips this dynamic. It teaches us to speak to ourselves gently, to forgive our missteps, and to encourage ourselves when the road gets rough. This kind of relationship doesn't develop overnight. It grows through small, intentional acts of self-care and self-respect. It might look like setting boundaries when you feel overwhelmed, or taking the time to do something you love simply because it brings you joy. It means listening to your own needs and honoring them even when the world demands otherwise. These small choices are the building blocks of a friendship that says, "I am here for you even when no one else is." Friendship with oneself also involves cultivating a sense of inner trust. Life is full of uncertainties, and we often look to others for guidance and reassurance. But the more we nurture a bond with our inner being, the more we come to rely on our own wisdom. This doesn't mean we shut others out or stop seeking advice. Rather, it means that we develop the confidence to weigh those opinions against what feels true to us. We become our own anchor, grounded and steady in the shifting tides of life. One of the most beautiful aspects of befriending yourself is the sense of wholeness it brings. Society often conditions us to believe we are incomplete, that we need a partner, a social circle, or external achievements to feel whole. But when you have a solid friendship with yourself, you realize that you are already complete. This doesn't mean you no longer need others or relationships. It simply means you no longer depend on them to define your worth. Your relationships become partnerships of mutual joy and growth, rather than attempts to fill a void. There is also a playful side to self-friendship. When you genuinely like your own company, you begin to enjoy being alone. You can take yourself out for coffee, immerse yourself in a hobby, or simply sit in silence without feeling the need for distraction. You laugh at your own jokes, find comfort in your own thoughts, and most importantly, learn to celebrate your life as it is. This isn't arrogance, it's a quiet contentment, a realization that your own companionship is enough. Of course, this friendship is not without challenges. There will be days when self-doubt creeps in, when your inner critic grows loud, or when you feel disconnected from yourself. But just as with any friendship, the key is to keep showing up. When a friend falters, you don't abandon them, you offer support and patience. The same principle applies to yourself. Befriending yourself is an ongoing process, a relationship you tend to over the course of your life. And why is this so important? Because every relationship you have with others is, in some way, a reflection of your relationship with yourself. If you are harsh and judgmental toward yourself, you may struggle to offer genuine compassion to others. But if you treat yourself with love and respect, that energy radiates outward. You become a better friend, partner, and member of your community, not by trying harder, but simply by being whole. In befriending yourself, you unlock the greatest gift of all, the ability to walk through life with a sense of inner peace. You no longer need the approval of others to feel worthy or the constant presence of others to feel connected. You are enough, just as you are. And that is the essence of self-friendship, an enduring bond that no circumstance or person can take away. Human beings are wired for connection. We crave belonging, a sense of being part of something greater than ourselves. It's a desire rooted in our evolutionary past, where survival often depended on the safety of the group. Yet in our modern world, this primal need has taken on a different shape. We don't just seek community, we seek validation, approval, and a place to fit in. But fitting in is not the same as belonging. And in this lies the illusion that so many of us unknowingly chase. The illusion of belonging is the belief that we can find our worth in the acceptance of others, that if we are part of a group we will feel whole. It's an enticing idea, one that society reinforces at every turn. And social media, for example, paints a picture of perfect friendships, vibrant gatherings, and the constant hum of connection. We are shown images of people smiling together, sharing moments of joy, and being celebrated by their peers. But what these images don't show are the doubts, insecurities, and performative interactions that often lie beneath the surface. How often do we find ourselves in spaces where we are surrounded by people yet feel deeply alone? This is the paradox of the illusion of belonging. It lures us into thinking that proximity to others equals connection. that being invited to the party or included in the group chat means we have found our tribe. But belonging is not about being physically present, it is about being seen, understood, and valued for who we truly are. And too often in our quest to fit in, we sacrifice authenticity for acceptance. The need to fit in can lead us to shape-shift in ways that are both subtle and profound. We laugh at jokes we don't find funny, agree with opinions we don't hold, and suppress parts of ourselves that we fear might be judged or rejected. We wear masks to blend into the crowd, but in doing so, we distance ourselves from our true selves. This disconnect is not just exhausting, it's isolating. When we can't show up as we are, even the connections we have feel hollow. This is the tragedy of the illusion of belonging. It promises connection, but often delivers loneliness. It keeps us focused on external validation, making us dependent on the opinions of others for our sense of worth. And because no external validation is ever enough to fill an internal void, we are left chasing an endless cycle of approval. This is why so many people, despite having large social circles or thousands of online followers, still feel unseen and unfulfilled. True belonging, in contrast, begins within. It is not about fitting in, but about being accepted for who you are, even by yourself. When you belong to yourself first, you no longer feel the need to mold yourself to fit the expectations of others. You can stand in your truth, knowing that your worth is not determined by how many people like you, invite you, or celebrate you. This self-acceptance is the foundation of all meaningful relationships, because it allows you to connect with others from a place of wholeness, not neediness. The illusion of belonging also thrives on comparison. We look at others and think they have what I lack: a close-knit family, a loyal friend group, a loving partner. But what we see is often only the surface. Every person has their own struggles, insecurities, and moments of isolation. The curated lives we envy are not the full stories. Recognizing this can free us from the trap of thinking that everyone else has it figured out while we are somehow falling behind. Stepping out of the illusion of belonging requires courage. It means being willing to stand apart from the crowd, to say no to relationships that don't nurture your soul, and to embrace solitude when it's necessary for your growth. It's about quality over quantity, seeking depth rather than breadth in your connections. A single relationship where you feel truly seen is worth more than 100 where you feel like a stranger. It's also important to acknowledge that belonging is not something others grant us, it's something we cultivate. We create belonging when we show up authentically, when we offer others the same acceptance we wish for ourselves, and when we build spaces where people can be real without fear of judgment. These spaces may be small: a trusted friend, a supportive partner, or even just yourself, but they are infinitely more valuable than the largest crowd. Ultimately, the illusion of belonging dissolves when we realize that we don't need to belong everywhere. We need to belong somewhere, and that somewhere often starts within. When you belong to yourself, you are no longer chasing connection, you are creating it. And in that creation lies the kind of belonging that is real, lasting, and liberating. Picture a tree standing alone in the middle of a vast, open field. Unlike the trees in a dense forest, it has no companions to shield it from the harsh elements. There are no neighboring branches to share the weight of a storm, no roots intertwined below the surface to offer support. It faces the full force of the wind, the unrelenting heat of the sun, and the heavy burden of snow on its branches. Yet, despite the odds, it thrives, a symbol of resilience and quiet strength. The lone tree's survival is not a result of external aid, but of inner fortitude. Its roots grow deep, anchoring it firmly in the soil, deeper than those of forest trees, which depend on the collective strength of their environment. It draws nourishment from the earth in ways that trees in a crowd do not need to, adapting to its circumstances. Every inch of its growth is a testament to its ability to endure and evolve. This tree does not have the luxury of leaning on others, and so it learns to stand tall on its own. The storms it faces do not weaken it, but instead toughen its bark and strengthen its core. Its branches may sway violently in the wind, but they do not break, for they have become flexible through repeated trials. The very isolation that might seem to make the tree vulnerable has, in truth, made it resilient. The lone tree is not shielded from change. Each season leaves its marked buds in spring, full foliage in summer, bare branches in winter. Yet with each cycle it adapts, proving that survival is not about resisting change, but embracing it. The leaves it loses in autumn are not a sign of weakness, but of preparation, an understanding that the tree must let go to endure. Its endurance is not passive, it is active, a constant process of growth, adaptation, and renewal. Unlike trees in a forest, the lone tree is fully exposed. It stands as it is, unhidden and unapologetic. This exposure shapes its character. It cannot hide behind the shadows of others, nor can it rely on their cover for its survival. It must confront every challenge directly, and in doing so it discovers its capacity to overcome. Its isolation also allows it to grow freely, unshaped by competition for sunlight or space. Its branches stretch wide, its roots claim the soil beneath it entirely, and its canopy becomes a unique expression of its individuality. Every twist and turn in its trunk, every scar on its bark, tells a story of struggle and perseverance, of the tree's journey to stand as it does today. Even in its solitude, the lone tree plays a vital role. Its presence becomes a haven for birds, a source of shade for travelers, and a marker of life in an otherwise barren landscape. It thrives not in spite of its isolation, but because of it, drawing strength from within to serve the world around it in ways only it can. At the heart of human relationships lies a curious paradox. The closer we try to hold on to others, the more elusive genuine connection becomes. We long for intimacy and understanding, yet the harder we chase it, the more we find ourselves faced with distance, disconnection, and unfulfilled longing. This paradox challenges our assumptions about connection, pushing us to question whether we truly understand what it means to bond with another person. Connection often begins as a natural human desire to bridge the gap between ourselves and others. We seek to share our thoughts, our feelings, and our experiences, hoping to be understood. But in this pursuit, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that authentic connection is not something we can force or demand. It is not a product of control, but of mutual openness and trust. The harder we cling, the more the other person may feel smothered, their autonomy threatened, and the bond strained. True connection requires space for individuality, for freedom, and for the natural ebb and flow of relationships. It is in this space that trust grows, where both parties feel free to express themselves without fear of judgment or coercion. But giving space can feel counterintuitive, especially when we care deeply. We worry that loosening our grip means risking the loss of the relationship, yet it is often in letting go that bonds strengthen. There is also the paradox of vulnerability. To connect deeply, we must be willing to show our authentic selves, including our fears, flaws, and insecurities. Yet, vulnerability makes us feel exposed, and the instinct to protect ourselves can lead to walls that prevent the very closeness we crave. The irony is that true intimacy arises not from perfection, but from the courage to reveal our imperfections. When we allow ourselves to be seen as we are, we create the conditions for others to do the same, and in that shared honesty, connection flourishes. The paradox extends to the idea of self-sufficiency within relationships. Many people believe that to connect with others, they must depend on them for their happiness or sense of completeness. But the more we rely on someone else to fill our internal voids, the more pressure we place on the relationship. This dependency can lead to resentment, misunderstandings, and a loss of balance. Paradoxically, the strongest connections often emerge when both individuals are self-sufficient, bringing their wholeness to the relationship rather than seeking wholeness through it. Another aspect of this paradox is the tension between sameness and difference. On one hand, shared values, interests, and experiences create a sense of familiarity and understanding, the bedrock of connection. Yet it is often our differences that spark curiosity, growth, and the depth that makes relationships rich and transformative. The challenge lies in navigating the balance, honoring what unites us while embracing what sets us apart. Even in the digital age, where connection seems more accessible than ever, the paradox remains. We are more connected than any generation before us, yet many feel lonelier and more isolated than ever. The abundance of superficial interactions can leave us starved for depth, reminding us that true connection is not about quantity, but quality. Freedom is a concept we often associate with independence, with standing apart from the crowd and breaking free from constraints. Yet true freedom, especially in the context of personal liberation, is not just about escaping external forces. It is about transcending the influences that shape our thoughts, actions, and beliefs. The freedom beyond the crowd is the freedom to be yourself, to live authentically, even when the world around you is pressing in with its expectations, norms, and pressures. The crowd represents the collective, the societal forces that pull us toward conformity. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned by those around us, parents, teachers, peers, and culture at large. These influences shape our views on success, beauty, happiness, and what it means to be good or worthy. There is an implicit promise in this collective conditioning that if we follow the prescribed path, we will belong, we will be accepted, and we will be secure. The price for this security, however, is often the loss of individuality and the suppression of the inner voice that tells us who we truly are. When we talk about freedom beyond the crowd, we are not simply advocating for physical isolation or withdrawing from society altogether. We are speaking of a deeper kind of freedom, the freedom to live on our own terms, to think for ourselves, and to make decisions that align with our inner values rather than the collective's desires. It is the freedom to hear the whispers of your own soul amidst the loud chatter of societal expectation. This type of freedom requires courage, for it means stepping off the well-worn path, often into the unknown. This freedom is not always easy to grasp. The pull of the crowd is strong, especially in a world that thrives on comparison and competition. Social media, for example, has become a platform where the crowd's influence is amplified, where images of success, beauty, and perfection are constantly presented as the standard to strive for. In this environment, it is easy to lose sight of one's authentic self, to get caught in the web of likes, validation, and the pursuit of approval. Yet the true cost of this pursuit is the suppression of the very qualities that make us unique, our quirks, our passions, and our deep-seated desires. To be free beyond the crowd is to liberate ourselves from the constant need for validation. It is the ability to exist without seeking the approval of others, to make choices that reflect our true nature, even if they go against the grain. This does not mean rejecting connection or relationships, rather. It means approaching relationships from a place of strength, knowing that our worth does not depend on how others perceive us. We learn to walk alongside the crowd without being consumed by it, to be part of society without losing the essence of who we are. In many ways, freedom beyond the crowd is also the freedom to embrace solitude. Solitude is not the absence of connection, but the space in which we find ourselves. It is in moments of solitude that we are able to hear the quiet voice of our inner truth, unclouded by the noise and distractions of the world. In solitude, we are not pressured to conform to anyone else's expectations. We can explore our desires, dreams, and fears without judgment. It is in these moments that we reconnect with our authentic selves, the part of us that exists beyond the roles we play and the personas we wear. This kind of freedom often feels like an act of rebellion against the culture of busyness, against the constant pursuit of external achievement, and against the pressure to live up to societal standards. But it is not an outward rebellion, it is an internal one. It is about breaking free from the beliefs and behaviors that bind us, that limit our capacity to truly experience life in its fullness. It is about unshackling ourselves from the stories that society has written for us and rewriting our own narrative. The crowd may provide a sense of belonging, but it also comes with the risk of losing yourself in the process. True belonging, paradoxically, comes when we belong first and foremost to ourselves, when we are grounded in our own truth. Freedom beyond the crowd is the realization that we do not need to be like everyone else to be worthy, that our uniqueness is our strength. It is the courage to stand alone, not in defiance of others, but in affirmation of who we truly are. In conclusion, the journey toward true freedom, connection, and self-understanding is not one that is defined by external validation or societal expectations. It is about recognizing the illusion of belonging, embracing the strength of solitude, and ultimately discovering the power that lies beyond the crowd. The paradox of connection reveals that true intimacy comes not from clinging to others, but from the courage to be oneself. In the same way, the freedom we seek is not found in escaping society, but in transcending its limitations and remaining grounded in our authentic selves. True connection begins when we stop searching for approval and instead nurture the relationship with ourselves. In this space, we are no longer bound by the need for constant external validation or the expectations that others place upon us. By standing in the strength of our individuality, we find that we are not separate from others, but deeply interconnected in ways that transcend the need for fitting in. The lone tree teaches us that strength is not in conformity, but in resilience and authenticity. It is only by embracing our own inner truth, free from the distractions of the crowd, that we can cultivate the kind of genuine connection that enriches both our own lives and the lives of others. And so true freedom, both personal and relational, is found not in being apart from the world, but in standing firm within it as our most authentic selves.